Welcome to Coffee with Vic. It's going to be an interesting discussion today. We're going to be talking about um, capitalism and socialism. Do you know what that is? You know what? I really wasn't too sure and probably had a simplified version myself for such a long time. Uh, but a little research. So I want to share that with you today, and we'll just kind of go through that whole issue about, what is this? Why are we focusing on this? I don't know. So this is Coffee with Vic. Welcome. I'm your host, Vic Vogel. All right, let's just, we do have a microphone going on here, so that's good news. Uh, do we have to choose between capitalism and socialism? You know, in talking with some people, just the other day, I was talking with somebody and, well, a few people, and I was asking, what's the difference between capitalism and socialism? And one of them is a free market economy as capitalism. And yeah, some of that rings true out of there, but it's not the whole story. And then the other one was socialism is you give people something for free that they didn't earn. So, uh, in some ways, there's a lot to some of that. In other ways, there's a lot of other issues that need to be addressed in that dynamic. So, I'm wondering why are so many Democrats professing to be capitalists? You look at Elizabeth Warren and others when they're asked, "Are you a capitalist or socialist?" It's like when the media is trying to get them to define one way or the other. Uh, they go, "No, I'm a capitalist," but and then there's always this but. So that got me wondering, is there a difference between capitalism and a free market society? I mean, do you have to be a capitalist to have a free market society? And what is capitalism today in a global society? I mean, my goodness, it's not just here in the United States, it's everywhere. And so, what are the differences between a capitalistic society and a socialist society? Does capitalism have to exclude socialism? Eh, some interesting thoughts. So, I want to talk about those a little bit today. So, uh, let's talk about capitalism, and let's do a little in-depth research into the evolution of capitalism and socialism. So, and let's start with the early period of capitalism. Capitalism, the terms capital and capitalism emerged in Europe primarily just a second here, primarily in the mid 16th century. So the terms capital and capitalism came about in the 16th century. They were referring to merchants. And generally, the term referred to the capital rich, people who own money and property and basically could live off their earnings and interest of their investments. And the primary goal for capitalists since its beginning has been the accumulation of wealth. With the accumulation of wealth, soon came power and control. This way of life soon began to develop as a class structure that separated the rich from the poor and began to create unrest around the 1800s when slavery and other issues were creating unrest among the working class. You need to get your coffee. Although capitalism originated in Europe and the United States followed kind of like a parallel path, capitalism became more prominent in the early years of World War I, where the machines and the industrial life began to accentuate the class division in the United States. People, were losing jobs because of machines. Later in the 1930s, capitalism began to be seen as an economic theory where making more money was the driving force for capitalism, with the assumption that this would create more jobs and higher wages, which would be better for all society. The two major world wars reinforced this idea because of the need for a supply of munitions and vehicles and supplies and for the war effort. And you saw capitalistic companies hiring people, providing health care benefits, even building homes and communities for low rent and providing them low rent for factory workers. At the end of World War II, the caring relationship between companies and workers, the capitalists and workers, continued. Many workers were proud to work for a company for 30 years and then retire with a pension. In the later 60s and up to the present, the refocusing of making more money as a driving force for capitalism became a primary theme. As costs increased and the economy began to change from an industrial society to a service society, the face of capitalism once again began to change, and it started creating a separation like it experienced in the 1800s. Today, we're finding once again, like the 18th and 19th century, where machines began to replace people with tools, an environment where computerization and artificial intelligence is beginning to dominate our society and creating an even greater class distinction between the capitalists and those who consider themselves socialists or the working class person. Capitalists like Amazon and Google and Microsoft and banks, they now constitute the vast majority of wealth and power in this country, and it's controlled by about 1% of all the population. Think of that. Out of all the people out there, 1%, this is where the power rests. More than ever, the term capitalist means the accumulation of wealth at the expense of the rest of the population. So now, and during this same period of time, believe it or not, socialism was beginning to evolve. So let's talk about socialism and the early period of socialism. The idea of socialism actually stretches back as far as Plato, around 300 BC, in his work The Republic, where he described an idealistic state where people were all equal and common. Then Francis Bacon, later in around the 1500s, published a work called Utopia, where everyone was equal. However, it wasn't until the 1700s that socialism became popular. That's not too far off from capitalism, because of the various class differences and the unrest with a growing industrialized society where class division was developing. An elite group owned property, money, and businesses, and others worked for them, often in slave-like conditions. During this time, many issues which might be recognized today also, although from a computer and artificial intelligence perspective, things like machinery replacing tools used by people. This computers now. And people began to worry that the income disparity would rise. And rightly so. That would help the rich become richer and the poor become poor. Does this sound familiar? This early movement of socialism took place primarily in Europe. Socialism in the United States began to become really dominant around the early 1900s over unfair working conditions, really. Several groups organized over primarily working conditions, but also the fear of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, and they would continue to suffer housing issues and working condition problems. These parties changed over time and grew to have as many as 100,000 members. And they were organized under a lot of different names, and one of them was like the Socialist Democratic Party. Because a similar movement was taking place in Russia at the same time, and it caused the Bolshevik Revolution in the early 1900s and eventually the overthrow of the Russian government. The United States got weary of that and enacted a law called the Espionage Act that forbid any negative talk about World War I and socialistic ideas. There was imminent fear by socialists in the United States of being linked to communism, which really is not quite the same thing, that developed in Russia, or membership in socialistic parties, and their membership dropped considerably, primarily because of activities created by Joseph McCarthy, who wanted to track down all socialists because he thought they were communists. Nonetheless, there were still active socialists in the United States, just not very visible or with much support, especially through the 1950s and 60s. Now, Great Britain and other European countries continued to pursue socialism in their forms of government, but they have since kind of like abandoned the idea of having government-controlled industries. There are, however, still signs of socialistic programs in many European countries. So, where does that leave us with socialism today? Despite socialism being unpopular, there are still programs in the US that are socialistic in nature. Socialism's primary premise is the redistribution of wealth. So, a couple of programs in existence today are the federal tax system that collects taxes from everyone and redistributes those taxes to help the poor people with welfare programs for food and other services. Medicare and Medicaid is another example of a socialistic program. Socialists continue to push reform in what is now a more capitalistic society, and many who push for these reforms consider themselves as capitalists but are concerned with overriding power and control of society and government of companies, or actually from companies like Amazon and Apple and Google. And think about that. These are mammoth organizations that are driving retailers out of business, for example. So where are we today? On one hand, the vast majority of wealth and power rests in the hands of 1% of the richest people in our society. Corporations are becoming more focused on generating profit and less concerned about ethics and morality. For example, the late 1980 financial collapse, the investigation of the top computer and social media firms today, just to name a few. We have a president who's under multiple criminal investigations who is challenging the real existence of our democracy and challenging the balance of power that our democracy is based on. We have a large number of financial crises looming in the world. For example, trade wars and Brexit and rising deficits. It's amazing. We have a 2020 election that has become an election that is pitting capitalism in its extreme against socialism in its extreme. So what's the answer? The answer is balance. Nearly everything works well in the world and sustains is based on balance. Our earth is based on balance in the universe. Our economy does the best when balanced. Our life is better when people are held to standards of ethics and morality. The answer to our need is not capitalism or socialism. It isn't any of the isms that the vast majority of us really don't understand. Our country was founded on everyone being guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You've heard those words before. You can't live a life if you can't earn a decent wage. You can't live a life if you can't afford a life saving drug. You can't have liberty and freedom if you are powerless against employers, banks, and others who control the money and power. You can't have liberty if you can't have complete, or if you can't compete because you can't afford an education. You can't have happiness if you live with the burden of debt that you can't climb out from under. You can't have happiness if you are discriminated against because of your race, religion, your age, your gender, or your sexual preference. You can't be happy if you see politicians and capitalists who break the law receive less punishment than those who have no influence or money. You cannot be happy living in a country that is divided and full of hatred, where people kill children in our schools for no reason, where people feel violent acts are actually the way to solve disputes. We don't need capitalists or socialists running our country. We need leaders who have ethics and morality. We need business leaders who see their businesses as more than achieving wealth. We need them to create businesses that distribute the wealth to those who contribute to their success. We need them to establish education programs and pay to support education of those who can take their businesses to greater heights. We need political leaders, including the president, who have as their driving goal to support the people and businesses in achieving a better life and a more secure and free life and a happier life for everyone in our country. We have to stop thinking along party lines, whether we are capitalists or socialists, and begin thinking about how we can ensure every experiences that provide a better life, a free and secure life, and a happy life. So, I suggest when you're out there selecting a candidate for 2020, get your mind off of socialism and capitalism both. Okay? They both have to be there. You have to have the ability to earn incomes. You have to have capitalism. You have to have an environment that allows growth and free growth. But that has to be tampered with uh, ethics and morality. You just can't have a business that's there to make money. There has to be something much greater in purpose. I think that's what World War II brought us. It brought us a bigger, more focused purpose. And that's why people were excited about working for companies, because they knew they were doing something greater than that company. Okay? It's not just building Amazon. It's not just building Google. It's what can happen positively that can secure our life, give us more happiness, provide us greater opportunity from now on. Okay? That's what Google needs to be thinking about. That's what Amazon needs to be. That's what our politicians need to be thinking about in terms of policies and laws that drive our country. That's what will make us a country that is great. It's not standing in a speech and promising things you can't deliver, actually not having the knowledge and the capability to lead and all the things that I just talked about. But don't put yourself in the socialist or capitalist world because, frankly, basically, the way I see it, we need capitalists that have ethics and morality. And with that in place, socialism will come. They'll want to help, they'll strive to help. That's what we need to do in America. Thanks for watching. This is Coffee with Vic, where we talk about things like this and other things too.